Welcome and thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Well, we're in a new navigated world of possibility, and joining us here on the program today, we're going to be talking about how we can have a match made in heaven. I'm certain that there are a lot of us out there by the time we approach age 50 are thinking to ourselves, I would have liked to have had that a long, long time ago, so where did I go wrong? You find yourself single and navigating those uncharted waters, at least uncharted for several years in most cases. The kids are out of the house, and you think to yourself, well, what's this dating all about, and how do I know when I've found the right one? On the program today, we're going to be joined by two wonderful guests, actually a husband and wife team who are award-winning authors. They're also internationally acclaimed consultants and seminar leaders whose transformational approach helps people to discover satisfaction and increase productivity in all areas of their lives. They have worked with such people as 500 companies and seminar programs around the world. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guests and author of the book, How to Have a Match Made in Heaven. Our guests today, Ariel and Shya Kane. Ariel, Shya, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
For having us, Daniel.
Yes, thanks for having us.
You've had a relationship for a long, long time, I can tell. But how did you find time with all of the things that you're involved in to have one?
Well, good question.
That's a very good question. Well, we date each other. We romance each other. We are actually with each other, even though we're doing other things.
We were actually talking about it this morning. We were having a cup of coffee, but we were really with each other. I think sometimes people think they have to set up a special date night, but really it's about being with your partner or being with the person you're dating while you're there, rather than being off in your thoughts. And if you're really with in my case, if I'm really with Shya in those moments, it's so fulfilling. It fills you up really quickly. So, even people who have extremely busy lives, if they're not distracted when they're with each other, life becomes really rich and magical.
Well, I know that certainly what you highlight a lot in your book, How to Have a Match Made in Heaven, is that a lot of people tend to not really live in that moment that you're talking about. They're either digging out and living from their past or they're living for their future, but they're never living and being here right now. And it sounds like that's the kind of chemistry that you have both been able to work out.
Right. Well, actually the full title of the book is How to Have a Match Made in Heaven, a transformational approach to dating, relating, and marriage. And it's really about discovering how to be present in the current moment of your life, so you're actually there with the people you're with. And when you're relating with them, you're actually being there to receive what comes back at you. And most of us throw away our conversations. We make statements, but then we're worried about what the response might be, so we suppress ourselves. Our idea is that this current moment of our lives is perfect, and if you're here for it, life is a gas.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel, you probably have a lot of listeners who are in long-term relationships that might have gone stale, and then there are other people who either got divorced or they've lost their husband or wife, and then they're looking now. And the key to intimacy, really, including physical intimacy, is really being where you are, because otherwise when you have physical intimacy, you're not actually feeling anything. You're going for something or trying to avoid something.
Or you're thinking about something, and we've discovered that no two things can occupy the same space at the same time. So if you're thinking about something, you're not really present. It's like watching television and eating, or reading a book and eating. You don't taste the food.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's a really good point of view for what I would like to ask here, because what you talk about in your book, and I believe the gal's name was Christine, is that she tended to seek, or I guess seek in relationships, sort of those unfulfilled needs or unfinished business that actually related more with her father than the actual person that she was seeking. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, yes, her name was Christiana, and she was a gal who was really fighting with her father, and that fight played out on the canvas of her relationship. And so her relationship was really unfulfilling because every way that she was fighting her dad translated over to her relationship. And
to her husband.
To her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a conversation with her in one of the videos. Shya and I have a subscription series on our website where people sign up to get videos of us working with people each week for a year. And we saw one of these videos with Christiana, and we realized that how she stumbled in relationship was so archetypical of how so many people get stuck unwittingly in their relationship, and they hamstring themselves so they never have what's possible, that we decided to write the book around it. So the book actually has links for those who are interested and enjoy it to the 20 videos of the people we're highlighting in the book. Mm-hmm. And we talked with her because she's in Germany, and she really hated her father. He did not share, he had some really unfortunate, in my opinion, views. He had been a Nazi during the war, and she hated him for it, and hated him for liking her brother better than her. And she gave her children first and middle Jewish names as her revenge on him, but it kept the war going. And we recently spoke with Christiana after not having spoken to her for 2 years about what was going on in her life.
Since the videoing took place, since we did that video.
And her relationship with her father has healed. He's become a nice man. Mm-hmm. He's no longer held in those old ways, and those old views aren't dominating their relationship anymore. They're done. They're gone. He's become sweet. He's become kind. He's become a mentor to their kids. There's something that can happen when you forgive and you get into the moment. You no longer have to have the people around you keep acting out old ways of relating.
See, our approach is not psychotherapeutic. Mm-hmm. It's anthropological. And all of us human beings were born into ongoing cultures, which is what an anthropologist studies, and we learned not only the language, but we learned how to relate through the people we grew up around. And most of us have modeled ourselves or our relationships after those of our parents. And if we're incomplete with either of our parents, then that incompletion dominates relationship. So it's really difficult to have a functional relationship if you're at war with one or the other of your parents, because then you're not really being you, you're being not them. And that gets in the way of having a rewarding, fulfilling relationship.
So in Christiana's case, she discovered how to forgive him for being him. He couldn't be different than he was, and it allowed her now to have a very sweet love relationship, because she doesn't have to be constantly fighting with her love relationship.
Now, you can see how on that end of the spectrum, you know, that there would be trouble in the water with a relationship like that. But how about in relationships, for instance, when somebody brings to the table the model of their parents in a good working relationship?
Well, in a certain, obviously that's easier, but if I'm...
Yeah, but is it really easier, Ariel? Think about, you know, the husband or the wife or boyfriend or girlfriend that brings the expectation of a relationship to a potential partner or a partner, and they just don't seem to live up to those expectations.
Yes, that is where I was going.
Okay.
On the surface, it's easier. But anytime you're thinking where you're comparing what you've got to your touchstone, which is your family or your parents, you're not actually really being here and dealing with the person who's in front of you. And anytime you're thinking about how to go about your relationship rather than living it, you have a handicap.
Well, Ariel and I have a rather interesting relationship in that we allow each other to be the way we are, and we don't judge each other for being the way we are. Mm-hmm. So we're not picking on each other in our minds, in our thoughts, and thinking we should be, or they should be different.
Mm-hmm. And we grew up in very, very different cultures. I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon, in Gresham. Shya grew up in Far Rockaway, New York, and we had very, very different backgrounds. So I'm not trying to have Shya have my background or my reality, and he's not trying to have me have his.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about that what I was asking just a moment ago because of a chicken soup story that you were sharing in there, and I found that I wonder if that seems to be more common than the other end of the spectrum where you were talking about Christiana and her father.
Well, I think people in general, Daniel, are stuck in the mechanical nature of their mind and their automatic judgmental thoughts, which you see, people aren't kind to themselves for the most part. Mm-hmm. They find fault with how they do things. They're self-critical and self-judgmental, and most people are their own worst enemies as far as being forgiving and kind to themselves. And you want to have a match that works, any relationship that works. The starting place is to give up being self-critical, or at least, if you can't give it up, become aware of your self-critical nature without judging yourself for it, and it'll start to dissolve if you start seeing it without resisting it. See, we have 3 ideas that are critical to transformation. The first one is anything you resist persists, it grows stronger, and it dominates your life or your relationship. The second idea is you can only be exactly as you are in the current moment of your life. You can't be different. You can't be standing when you're sitting. You can't be any other place than where you are when you're hearing this radio show. Right. And the third idea is anything that you allow to be exactly as it is without judging completes itself, loses its power over your life. Now, that's a radical departure from working on yourself. That's not psychotherapeutic. It's just about noticing and seeing without judging, which is a skill set that you can get much better at over time because our minds are so automatically judgmental. We judge people for the way they look, the way they sound, the way they act, the way they breathe.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting point, Shya, and I wanted to point this out because we had a neurophysicist on our program, and this was some time ago, and there was something really interesting that was brought up in his body of work, and I looked into it more, and I thought, wow, and that is how the mind works. And he talks about the fact that the brain is a tremendous efficiency expert. Okay, when you think of all the systems that the brain has to operate unconsciously throughout the body, when it comes to developing a new habit or way of doing things, it will try to do it, get to know it, so that it can become automatic, like when you get up and you have your cup of coffee in the morning, or perhaps you read the paper, there's a particular show that you like to watch. There are a pattern of habits, and the reason you have those is so the brain expends as little energy as possible in those areas. Now, when people go to make these changes, perhaps they could be in a relationship that they're in, there is a lot of aggravation because now it forces the brain to think about it a little more. It kind of has to reduce its focus in the other areas so it can focus on this new thing. And so people don't tend to like change as much as they want this change.
Yes.
And what was fascinating, he says, is if you can begin to pay attention on just that principle alone and start reflecting inwardly to how you are in the world, then you begin to achieve what the two of you are talking about in your book, and that is that you're not on autopilot anymore, and the world becomes pretty miraculous. Or as you talk about, transformation is instantaneous, but it also has its compounding effects that go along with it.
Absolutely. It's really, really true.
You know, there was a study done at Dartmouth College on how the brain works, and in this study they wired people's brains up, and they noticed when new information was given to somebody that disagreed with what they already believed to be true, there's a part of the brain that automatically shows up to say no.
It fires up.
So it tries not to hear anything new that will challenge the system that's in place. And, you know, when you say change, we're not big advocates of change.
Right.
Because change is always incremental. Change are New Year's resolutions that people have made year in, year out and never live up to. Change are all those things you say you're going to do differently that you still do the same.
Right.
So our approach is really about bringing awareness, which is a non-judgmental seeing, to how it is that you're going about your everyday life. And if you do see things that aren't very productive, if you don't judge yourself for them, if you are kind to yourself, they transform, they let go of you. In fact, everything that we've ever learned came out of an epiphany that I had about 25, 26 years ago, where I realized I couldn't be any different than I was in the current moment. I really couldn't be anywhere else. And I had tried to change and fix myself for years. I'd taken every course. We took courses together to try to change or fix our relationship. And when I realized that I couldn't be different, I stopped working on myself. I stopped beating on myself to be the way I thought I should be. And I allowed myself to be the way I was. And in that moment, I stopped working on Ariel as an extension of me, judging her. And suddenly she became brilliant.
Right.
My experience of myself in that moment absolutely shifted. I think most people underestimate how much they hamper either the people they're dating or the people they're in relationship with by how unkind they are to themselves. So if I'm picking on me, by extension, Shya is going to feel it. And also I will be taking that lens of critical nature, and I will be looking through it to him as well, just as harsh as I look at me. And when you let go of that, it is shocking how immediate it translates into your ability to relate and well-being and feeling good in your own skin.
And you said something else about when you get into the moment, how magnificent life is. See, a lot of people, every day is same old, same old. Not so with us. We've discovered the moment, and the moment is unique, and the moment is special. Every moment of our lives, all our lives, if we're here for it, is special. But you see, most of us are so preoccupied in our thoughts that we're never really where we are, and so everything stays pretty much the same.
Right. You know, the thing is, I wanted to touch on, Shya, because you brought this up specifically, is that that you had this need to work on yourself, that who you are wasn't enough or who you are wasn't good enough, that you could have been better. Now, for both of you, Ariel and Shya, and the years that you've been doing this, where do you think we actually began getting that message that who we are just wasn't enough or wasn't good enough, whatever it is?
Well, you know, look, we've all been inculcated or socialized.
Okay.
See, I went to school and I became an anthropologist. So I've watched people and I notice how people function, and we grow up. The first 6 years of a child's life, they download information. They absorb information. It's not only do they learn the language of the culture, but they learn the rules and the mores and the standards of the culture. They learn the what's right and what's wrong.
And they absorb how the people around them think. So it's not so much what people say to them, it's how the people around them, their parents, their teachers, the people in their community and in the clergy, all the people around them, how they think and relate to life, they absorb, and they absorb it almost like a hypnotic state where they don't fact-check it.
Because in the first 6 years, a child's brain is in a theta brainwave state, which is like a hypnotic trance. They're downloading information. They're absorbing information for the first 6 years, and that information is absorbed as though it is the truth. See, that's the real problem. And so, look, when you're small, you're not as capable as you eventually become as you mature. So your ideas about yourself, the thoughts you have, they're repetitive. If you think you're not good at something, you gather evidence to prove yourself right that you're not good at that, and then that becomes a lifestyle.
Well, and generally at first, we weren't good at things. And the other thing that we've noticed after working with thousands and thousands of people, Daniel, is that the things that people are really, really good at, they disregard because to them it's normal. And other people look at them and go, oh, my goodness, that person is so brilliant at this or at that. And that person is like, what? Oh, that's nothing. But it really isn't nothing. Most people absolutely underestimate how brilliant they are.
So I got a question for you. Although he was a fictional character, how would you have worked with Sam Malone of Cheers?
It makes no connection. I don't know who Sam Malone of Cheers was.
He was the bartender in Cheers.
But
okay, never mind.
Cheers, I'm not.
Shya was in the.
I was living in the Maine woods at that time without electricity. I have no. I can't. And I'd love to answer your question, but I can't.
So much for the cosmic joke there. Now, what's interesting too is that you talk about taking 100% responsibility for yourself, for everything that happens with you. Now, for our listeners out there, this is really an empowering thing to do, because people would tend to say, well, no, that happened to me, or, that was fate or something else. But if you can start taking 100% responsibility, and you talk about this as well, things actually become easier, don't they?
Well, otherwise you victimize yourself with your life.
And you start seeing the same things again to prove that you're right.
Yes, and I'll tell you, in our relationship, if something's going on, I take a look. It's not like, well, Shya, there's never a good one and a bad one.
In our relationship, if there's something going on that's not functioning or flowing or easy, I look to see what I'm doing to create it rather than blame Ariel for it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for me. So it's my responsibility to have our relationship work well.
Right.
And lots of people want to.
It certainly is.
Lots of people want to do my share, your share.
Right. And when it's a 50-50 deal, you're always looking to see if the other person is doing their fair share.
Yeah. Well, that comes to a point when a relationship just doesn't seem to be working out. How do you decide then that maybe it's time to go separate ways? I mean, because, in your book, How to Have a Match Made in Heaven, it's a transformational approach to dating and relating in marriage, but there just comes that time, it seems like, where you go separate ways.
Well, you could have it be dating, relating, marriage, and divorce, if you like.
It could be.
I guess.
Actually, I think one of the places to really look is to, if you like you when you're with that person.
I see. Okay.
Because I've recently been seeing people, and some people, their relationship still, it's embattled, but they still have possibility, and others, it's clearly the end point, but it's inconvenient, because when we tie our lives together, it gets inconvenient. You have to,
especially if
there are children involved.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you feel about you while being around that person? Do you always feel like you're a grouchy, awful person? Do you feel good in your skin? Do you feel like you can communicate? And if the answer is not yes, you may want to take a look. It may be time.
Fascinating stuff. Now, at your workshops that you've conducted, and obviously hundreds around the world, You've probably seen a lot of incredible breakthroughs with couples where they thought, I really never thought about it this way before, what you're showing me here. Well, that must have been pretty liberating and exciting for the two of you.
It is liberating, but one of the things you asked Shya earlier a question about where we got the idea that there was something wrong with us. I think that there's hand in hand with that. I think a lot of people out there have an interest in what's possible, covered over by the idea that they're not okay. So part of the reason Shya and I did all of the workshops that we did was not only because as participants was not only the idea that there was something wrong that needed fixing, but I truly, and I know I'm speaking for Shya as well, had a passion for what's possible. And I really think that that's something that will lead people into a better relationship or a match made in heaven. You have to keep going. You have to keep looking for what's possible, because if you have an interest and you keep looking, you'll find it. Same with dating. You have an interest, you keep looking, and you don't quit on yourself, you'll find it.
And the key, as you said earlier in the program, is the first thing you bring to a relationship is yourself.
It is. So if you're kind to yourself, you're going to have a whole lot more fun, and you're going to be attractive.
And you see, most people, Daniel, have to learn to be kind to themselves, because most of us were not raised by people who are kind to themselves.
Right.
Because they were raised by people who weren't kind to themselves. You can't blame your parents, you see, because they did the best they knew how to do, but they were raised by two people that life wasn't easy. Look, this is a program for people over 50. Now, I'm 71. Ariel is 54. And we've been together over 30 years now. Mm-hmm. And, my father escaped from Russia in I think it was around 1914. He had to go underneath barbed wire fences and run for his life. When he was 6 years old, he went underneath a freight train to the Caspian Sea to buy salted codfish to bring back to support his family.
Wow.
He didn't have a chance. And when I was a kid growing up, I thought my father wasn't interested in my life. It wasn't that he wasn't interested. He didn't know how to be interested. He was so survival-oriented. And that says nothing about how his parents were or his parents' parents. Life was not easy 100 years ago, 150 years ago, or far beyond that, going further back in time. So nobody got classes in parenting and communication and relationship skills. That just didn't exist. This is an amazing time you and all our listeners live in,
Yeah, there's this in the dictionary, the word forgiveness, the definition is to not only give up the right to punish, but to give up the desire to punish. And I think lots of times...
And to have as if the event never happened.
So lots of times people look back at their past. You almost have to forgive your past. It's not relevant. Your past does not have to determine how you relate today.
All it takes is to get into the current moment of your life and stop listening to that story you've told yourself about who you are.
I had limping along relationships right up until the moment I met Shya. Mm-hmm. There's really something to be said for keeping going, whether it's in your current relationship or in the dating mode, where you just don't give up on yourself. And really, again, we can't stress enough, being kind to yourself and your thoughts has a huge impact on your ability to relate.
Profound.
Well, Shya, there's one thing that I can definitely say is I come to understand you a lot better now in the story you shared about your father in Russia and having to go and get salted cod, and that is why you decided to marry someone who holds 6 women's world records in international game theory.
Well, she didn't have them when she met me. I taught her how to fish.
Oh, I see.
And I tied all the flies that she caught those fish on.
You know, he really, really supports me into my excellence.
That's what it is.
I have to say.
I have no world records. She has them all, but that's...
Yeah, my largest is...
114 pounds, 5-ounce Pacific sailfish on 12-pound test line.
That's crazy.
It is crazy.
So what did she use to catch you then?
Her sex. Sex and more sex.
The book is How to Have a Match Made in Heaven. It's a transformational approach to dating, relating, and marriage. And if you could, folks, could you give out a website people can find out more?
Yes, there's two websites. Our main website is transformationmadeeasy.com, transformationmadeeasy.com. And for the book itself, it's matchmadeinheavenbook.com, matchmadeinheavenbook.com.
What a pleasure to have both of you here on the program today. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Thank you. We enjoyed ourselves.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. If you didn't get those websites down, then be sure to visit us at beyond50radio.blogspot.com. We'll definitely have that posted there along with the archive as well so that you can listen and enjoy this and pass it on to others as well. I'm Daniel Davis. This is the Beyond 50 radio program. Thank you again for joining us, and remember, live your day past halfway.